Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Clemens. I'm going to stand up on this stage. I'm editor-at-large of the National Interest. And I'm also CEO of Widehall. Widehall and Siemens have had a magnificent partnership, not only here in Washington, but around the country, looking at this issue of AI for real. What does industrial AI mean? And today, our job is to look at the workforce dimensions of that, and to look at what do you actually have to do. And one of the things I find in Washington, I'm going to have a great senator up here to talk about, I'm always intrigued how water doesn't go downhill in Washington without legislation or without, work. That there's a problem sometimes in kind of getting the sort of force that we need, the workforce that we need, the kind of orientation we need. DC is sort of this place where we need to think about the policy dimensions of these various issues. And today that challenge is workforce and the fact that we need a lot more folks in this space and what it's going to take to get there. So we've got a fantastic program to do that. We're going to look at, how this is going to impact productivity, high skills jobs, but what the real trade-offs are and the choices. And for that, I'm going to start this morning. This is going to be like a Steve Clemens show, so you're going to be seeing a lot of me. I like to have conversations with people, and I've learned most of what I know from Steve Scully. I want to say Steve Scully, you may all remember him from C-SPAN Washington Journal, Sirius XM Radio, and others, but you've got some real experts in the room who've been doing this as well. So it's great to have you all here with us. And I like questions. So when we get some of these folks up here, feel free to be active. We've got folks to run the mics around, and we'll have a conversation with all of you. But let me welcome now to the stage my friend who's been on the same stage with me before, largely discussing AI and defense last time. Now we're going to discuss AI and workforce, but Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota. Senator, come join us.
Thank you, sir.
You just like the Hay Adams for breakfast, right?
Not a bad spot.
So let me just start. Look, I feel like, we do have this, the topic of AI and getting workforce there, but I also just want to acknowledge this town is stressed out right now. I think it's stressed out, or maybe it's laid back when the government is shut down, but how's it going for you?
Look, it's tough. Bottom line is we're shut down. That means that our staffs are not being paid. It means military, for the most part, while they're promised to be paid, they're not going to be paid for a while yet. You've got, along with that, a number of programs out there that are now going to start being impacted directly, where people that really rely on government programs are not being able to participate in those programs. Across the country, we've had farmers who have, for a while, couldn't cash a check because they couldn't get it countersigned because there was nobody in those offices because they're shut down. So yeah, you've got a serious issue going on here, but even more than that, if you're shut down, that also means that you're not doing new contracts. And it means that you're not able to participate in developing the new plans for the new year, the new fiscal year, where you have a difference of shutting down one contract, starting a new contract, and so forth. None of that's going on. The cost to the country when you're in a shutdown is an additional $5 billion per month. And so there's no reason for us to be in this shutdown. And that's part of the frustration on this is we were moving very well into a program where we were actually doing appropriations on time for the first time literally in a decade. And I'm a Republican. I just flat out, I don't think this was the right thing to do. And I think, picking a fight on this particular stuff here was not necessary. So we're in the shutdown. We're hoping that the shutdown will end, but our message to our Democrat colleagues has been, end the shutdown, let's get back to work, and we'll start to address some of the issues that you've indicated you have real concerns over. But in the meantime, it's not helping the people that are in healthcare or anyplace else.
Well, Senator, as I saw you this morning, I said, hey, we're on the same stage. It's AI, Hay Adams, and you pull that Yogi Berra line. It's deja vu all over again. And I love metaphors, folks, and sometimes they don't work. But my favorite emoji is a surfer. And you send that little surfer. If I like you, you get the surfer. Anybody surf here for real? I don't surf. I just am a wannabe surfer. There's one person in the room. Maybe two, okay, two. Well, if you go to Huntington Beach, California, there's a place called The Wedge. And The Wedge is a place where these giant waves come in, but then they get up over the sand and then the wave collapses. And there are a lot of people who do this. And I sort of feel like that's the AI world, right now. That you've got this tsunami, this big wave hitting America coming in, it's everywhere, but the workforce is the fuel that you need to do it, and that wave could collapse. Is that metaphor working? David, you understand that a little bit? Okay. So the question is,
that was nice of you to agree with him.
Okay. So I'm just interested in the workforce side of this, right? Because you and I have talked about this AI, what it may deliver. You don't have the workforce as a new wired generation to get there. And I want to ask you what I asked you before, which is how serious an issue do you think that is? What do we need to get right by way of rewiring American workforce for this next generation of tools?
Unemployment rate in the United States today is 4.3%. So everybody says, well, we're in a reasonable length. This is going to be a case where we need workers at a time in which we're having fewer and fewer kids. So your TFR in the United States today, the total fertility rate's about 1.65, between 1.6 and 1.65. In order to have the same number of people coming up, born and living in the United States as what you have today, you have to have a 2.1 live births per woman in their childbearing years in order to actually maintain population. We're not maintaining population here right now. So if you start out with that to begin with, so you're having fewer kids, which means you have fewer kids to choose from to go into the workforce to begin with. That is a long-term issue. China is at 1.05. They're losing 800,000 people in population just because of the decline in population growth right now per year. That's to start it out with. So your base number of kids coming in is declining unless you include immigration. And right now, as you know, that's a challenging subject. Number two, we don't have enough young people entering fields that traditionally people would say are the trades craft. Whether you're talking electricians, plumbers, anybody that's working in a manufacturing facility, people that are building buildings. We know right now that just on the building side of things, just for construction alone, we're going to need about another 155,000 jobs per year for the next 10 years. Just for construction, the new construction that we expect to occur, in part because of the development of AI facilities across the United States and new manufacturing facilities that we need to be put in place. So where's that going to come from? We've got to have a coordinated effort where businesses are recognizing their demand over the next, whether you talk a 4-year period, 5-year period, 10-year period, and you're going to have to go back to the people that normally are in the business of training and say, I got to partner with you. I got to figure out a way to help you deliver to me what I need in terms of labor for my workforce. And I think that's going to be the key is where is that coordination? Is it a left and right, back and forth, might work here, might not work there? Or are we going to have a coordinated effort where we've got educational systems that are designed specifically, this is their job, is training young people to actually respond to the needs that you tell them that you have?
You know, a buddy of mine, Greg Ip of the Wall Street Journal, is writing an article on how the premiums that used to be in the professional services in law and whatever are coming down. But boy, if you're a welder, if you're in electrification, or if you are out in, we're going to be talking to Jay Timmons and others from the National Association of Manufacturers, you're in these jobs and you kind of get yourself wired, so you're AI friendly or AI adaptable in these jobs as well. The price for that skill is going through the roof. Are your constituents feeling that opportunity?
They're feeling, when we talk about the constituents, I think it's a matter of, are the kids feeling that opportunity? Right. And I think the answer to that is yes, they are. And what they're wondering is so how do I get from the point of being in high school when I'm making these decisions to the point where I know which one of those trades or which one of those I'm going to do, and how long is it going to last, and what does that do for me in terms of my ability to actually get rich? Because you're in high school, you want to get it, you want to have a job, you want to have all that stuff. And that planning process needs to start early, and we've got to be able to show them the path. I used to say that in South Dakota, where I'm from, I was the governor of South Dakota there for 8 years. I used to say
which you like better, being governor or senator?
You already know that. Working as a governor is absolutely the greatest job in the world, no question about it. You can get things done. Up here you can talk about it, but unless you've got a whole lot of other people with you, you're not going to get it done. So you've got to convince other people to do the same thing. That becomes a challenge once in a while. But, okay, look, here's the deal. You've got, in South Dakota, I always said the biggest challenge we have is keeping our young people in South Dakota, because it always looks like the grass is greener on the other side of the hill, across the fence. So what do? You've got to let them know, and I've told businesses, it is your fault if you let them get away. So I'm going to say that to all of you out there as well. It's your fault if you let young kids get away and go someplace else. Make them feel valuable. Don't let them get away. Allow them to see a pathway towards success. They are an asset that is not that is not replaceable. And so let's just talk about what that means. You've got to train them, which means how do you help to make it easy for that young person to get trained? And then how is it that you make it easy for them to get into your country or company? And then how is it that you make it easy for them to stay with your company and see a future? Or for that matter, if it's a contractor, how do you teach them the training skills, the basic business skills to be able to run their own business? And that's where a lot of the electricians, the plumbers, the heating and air conditioning units, the guys, they can run their own thing. They can be their own businessman. They can own their own business. They can see the future growing, and they see an opportunity for real success down the road. How do we get that to them? And I think that's a coordinated effort between businesses and an education community that really does, I think, struggle with how to explain that and to bring these people in. And then who's going to help them pay for that bill? Who's going to say, you are so good, I don't want you to leave. I got a scholarship for you. You come to work for me for 3 years, but by golly, I'll pay for your 2-year technical education program. You come to me for 3 years and then you're on, but by golly, by then I'll have you locked in. I mean, those are the types of things that we got to be talking about. And AI is going to demand more of that, not less. AI is going to require more people working in the United States, not less. I know there's people out there that are afraid about losing jobs. I'm just telling you, I don't believe we're going to lose jobs. We may lose lower skilled jobs, but the job of a business person is to take that person that was in that lower skilled job and to help them become a more skilled person and to put them back to work again. That's what you guys are good at.
We're going to have David Etzwiler from the Siemens Foundation up here, and we're going to talk about various workforce initiatives, and we're going to have this show with people coming and going, kind of talking about different, directions in this. But I am interested in that sort of tension that many Americans feel. Well, on one hand, they feel anxiety about AI. On the other hand, they see opportunity in AI. And I've been on shop floors and see how digital tools, I'll call them digital tools, which really are AI tools, but they're digital tools, have come in to really transform people's capacity to do more, and there are people on that floor. And I'm just interested, I sort of feel like there's a lack of show and tell to say, hey, it's a picture that can work. And as you're talking to Siemens and you're talking to Google, Grow with Google in various places in South Dakota, and some of the rural area, I mean, you've got rural and you've got cities, of course, but what is your advice to them on how to get that workforce of the future messaging right?
Part of it is you've got to be to those kids when they're making those decisions, which is where are you going to find the young person that's going to stay in the area that you want them to be in? How are you going to convince them, unless you're there in front of them, that they're valuable? It takes time to look at them as an individual and to say, you're pretty important to me. But that's what it takes, because to them, they don't want to be part of a crowd. They want to be seen as recognized as being individual for them. When you hire an employee that's in one of your executive programs, you don't go to a whole bunch of people and say, you're all valuable. You go in and you look at each one of them and you say, man, you'd fit this particular position. That's the way, and using the technologies we've got today, you can pinpoint it and identify young people who might work in your particular position. Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota, 30 miles outside of Sioux Falls right now, graduates about 400 young people a year in cybersecurity, including AI. The banking community in Sioux Falls, which needs these folks for their cybersecurity and so forth, they hire these kids at the rate of basically most of them have a job before they're out of their junior year in college, and they move from there. What we've got to do is to be able to take that same thing and move into every single technical school and make sure that the organizations that are out there that have a demand for these young kids recognize how valuable they are and go in and seek them out before they even get into a technical school. And this is in high schools. So how many businesses actually go into a high school and say, I'm hiring and I'll help you get your technical degree, and what I want you to do is agree to come to work for me and to make it easy for them to do that. and to work through the issues of young people going through that stage in their life.
Let me just ask you, I know we're near limit, so give me a couple more minutes because the senator's pretty cool. You're part of the Senate AI Task Force Working Group, which I think is beginning to come back together when you guys come back in. And we've talked a little bit about the geostrategic consequences of losing this race and not getting it right with China and whatnot. But I'm interested in, is there a kind of focus on the holistic ecosystem of AI, from workers, but understanding its critical materials, which including power, where you're such a big player in this, and that includes, a social contract around the country between rural and urban. Is there that kind of mapping going on where you sit?
There is, but it's more on the lines of what's our goal. I think one of our proposals is what do you call it, ASAP, but what it's designed to do is to accelerate the development of science by a rate of 10 between now and the year 2030. So as scientific developments come through right now, we believe, we actually put out a request for information from a lot of different organizations. We had 173 different responses to it. Only 3 said you can't do that. The other 170 basically said, not only can you do it, but you ought to be working on it right now. And the issue is you have to accelerate science. Do I believe it happens? It'll happen? Yeah, no question about it. Artificial intelligence is here. It is not going away. And it's going to develop at a faster pace than anybody ever thought it would. And right in the middle of this thing, I'm just to tell you, if you're not already getting comfortable with talking about the term quantum, you ought to get there, because it's not very far away from us in terms of quantum computing and quantum systems, in which it will once again accelerate by a factor of more than 10 how quickly we will make decisions, which is what AI is all about. How fast can you make decisions? How fast can you make movements? How fast can you do stuff? AI does that, and it makes decisions on its own based upon the training that you do. The data centers that we're going to need, and the development of these data centers, is going to take a huge amount of manufacturing. It's going to take a huge amount of power. That's where organizations like Siemens comes into play. They will have a demand. Right now they are at capacity, and they are pushing way beyond for the next 5 years in terms of just the turbines alone that we're going to need, and we're still not going to keep up. Our competitor is China. We do about 1,350 gigawatts of power right now in the United States. We need easily between 100 and 200 more gigawatts between now and the year 2028. We don't know how we get there yet. China, on the other hand, is 4 times bigger than us right now in terms of the amount of power production they've got, and they will produce 300 to 400 more gigawatts per year on their current plans. So reality is we have to fix this here in the United States, and it requires manufacturing, and it requires a labor force to fill in those manufacturing jobs. Anybody that thinks that AI is going to take jobs away, I'm sorry, it will change the types of jobs, but you're going to need more people here, and we will not fill those positions just with our natural born workforce. Sometimes not popular to say it, but legal immigration is critical to the success of this country long term. We've got to be able to bring in the best and the brightest who want to see the American dream. We've got to have a legal immigration system that allows that to happen.
Well, with that, I want to thank Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota. Thank you so much for spending time with us this morning, Mike. It was great. And I did just leave you one thing. I think it's safe to ask this now because of the owner. How many of you are on TikTok? I am on TikTok. I don't do it yet. If anybody, so you're all very shy about this. You're not on TikTok, best I can tell. You still don't trust the government.
Nope.
Yeah, you don't trust the deal.
Just tell you, if you're doing TikTok, the bottom line is TikTok is used across the world,
right,
to influence other countries, their political processes, and so forth. And what they see in China on TikTok, right, is not what we see in the United States.
Yeah.
There's educational programs in China. They're designed over here to get our kids off of educational systems, and it is a manipulative program that needs to go away.
Appreciate that view, and I just thought the White House said it was okay. The reason I ask about it is I'm deluged now by, 28 days and you'll know AI, everything about AI. So you haven't done those things yet.
I have not.
Okay, well.
I'm still in the 3rd grade on this stuff here and trying to get to the 4th.
Well, I do want to just say, first of all, I appreciate your willingness to talk about these things because I am really interested, and I think that the groundswell of support, and engagement with AI is happening in ways that are really robust in American society and coming on in ways that this town may not understand. But I appreciate all the things you're doing with it, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So, Senator, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to welcome to the stage. Let me invite David Etzwiler. Are you, I think you're, hold on here. I think he's president. Hey, David is my friend, so that's number, but he is the chief executive officer of the Siemens Foundation. You've never gotten a what?
A surfboard for me. You just
Well, an
said your friends
emoji.
get
It's an
surfboards.
emoji. It's an emoji. And people say, why do you use the surfer emoji? Because, I sort of look at this as a time where things aren't static. They're waves. And, one of the ways to, is not get too focused on structures, what waves are going to create. So for me, it is the way I sort of look at moments of change. But I do think that you need various parts to fuel a wave, which is what I was trying to describe before. And I think that and I'm going to be honest, I don't think we have until recently been very good at workforce development. You've been at this for a long, long time, and the Siemens Foundation is making big investments to change that picture. So why don't we start there? Because you've heard these programs we've done of AI for real and industrial AI and the new opportunities for a more more digital capable workforce. And I just think we used to be terrible in this country with workforce training, and now something seems to have shifted. So tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I wholly agree. I think we have been not so good at this. I think we still have a long ways to go. And I think some of the partners in the room here from North Carolina, Caroline Sullivan from NCBCE and Scott Ralls, who will be up here later, will reinforce that.
That's the head of a community college that's got 70,000 students.
Yeah.
Just imagine that.
Yeah, but we are in total agreement.
Yeah.
We've been at this for 10 or 11 years now at the Siemens Foundation, really building on new-collar jobs, those jobs that require more than a high school degree, less than a college degree, and strong technical skills. They're a floor to a career, not a ceiling, right? They come with good pay. They come with benefits. And when you look at what's happening in our society right now, you look at the polls, right? You look at the Wall Street Journal NORC poll from last month. 70% of people believe that the American promise is dead or is sound asleep, one or another. This idea that if you work hard and you set goals that you should be able to provide for yourself and for your family is something that is really waning, and that has implications in our society. We know from the Edelman Trust Barometer, for example, that 37% of 17 to 25-year-olds who are not in college are not employed, right? And hold those up against the statistics that the senator was quoting for us, right? In terms of the number of jobs out there. 500,000 open manufacturing jobs in this country, 80,000 electrical jobs coming online each year.
Right.
And yet we're losing folks. Folks are graying out. They're retiring faster than we're able to put folks in. So there's a huge opportunity here. There's a huge issue, right, in terms of that American promise. And there's a huge opportunity or confluence of those things in terms of getting folks trained and figuring out how to do it well. But as you point out, the secret sauce is how do you find career pathways? How do you build those ecosystems in ways that are replicable, in ways that invite all folks from corporations, competitors, customers, et cetera, to come together with the education system, government system, and understand that if we do this right, we establish standards, we donate equipment for training, that's how we take advantage of the reshoring and the AI boom. That has to happen.
So Siemens has been at this for quite a while. And I remember about a decade ago, some of my friends from Siemens here may correct me, but I remember Siemens donated really billions of dollars I remember it was PML software to community colleges and partnerships with various companies, and kind of laid a groundwork on how design and thinking and conceptualization in this digital space. And I should tell everybody, Siemens is actually the architect of digital twins. So you're a digital leading company in this space, and I sort of now when I look at the apprenticeships, and so tell us a little bit about Siemens Educates America and the size and scale of what you're doing, because I don't think people realize how much you are doing in the country at the scale you are.
No, I'm happy to talk about that. It's one of those things in a company where just now our communications folks are helping us understand how much we're doing, because it can feel kind of disaggregated to some degree. But you're right. It's been about 10 or 11 years since the Siemens Foundation really re-strategized in terms of focusing on workforce for all the things I just mentioned a moment ago. So much of that, right, is about who are our customers, where are our networks in workforce training, but also a German culture, right? There's a parent company in Germany that knows how to do apprentices.
You guys are German?
Yeah, so we were Siemens USA, but there's a parent in Germany, right, there that has helped us. We've taken governors over to Switzerland and Germany to see the
Well, that's where they've got
apprenticeship-
apprenticeships are so big.
To
And
see apprenticeships
you're pushing
built in.
apprenticeships, like you've got, what, 32,000 apprenticeships a year now?
We've got thousands, I don't know the exact number in the company, but we work very closely with with
I
New
got it
America.
here.
You
It's
know it well.
32,000 annually,
okay.
and you're going to 45,000 by 2030,
you
according to
go.
my ChatGPT
Perfect.
search.
And we work very closely with New America, the Partnership
Right.
to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, which is something that we started years ago. And so much of what the senator talked about is getting this message out to folks about what apprenticeships offer to people, and talking not only to folks who might be apprentices, but also to parents of folks who might be apprentices, right? Understanding that when you have this conversation, it's not enough to say, that sounds like a great opportunity for my next door neighbor's child, but actually understanding, no, that's a great opportunity for my child. And you start to see that in ecosystems, for example, South Carolina, parts of North Carolina, and Colorado have those ecosystems where folks are seeing that. You walk in and not only see banners of colleges in high schools, but you see different opportunities for apprenticeships in the high schools. And folks understand these are great jobs with great benefits.
How do you know when you're winning? Or I
Winning
should say
in-
succeeding. For me, succeeding is winning, so everything is, are we winning or losing? But how do you know that you're moving the needle in substantive ways? And I almost ask this, we're sitting in Washington, D.C., and I often feel like we're frogs in a pot that's getting hotter and hotter and don't know it. And so part of the question, see, I'm really bad with metaphors, but I mean, I think the question is when you look at the consequences of getting this right, and I have to tell you, I have a lot of respect for what you do. I have a lot of anticipation and excitement about this future of an AI world. But it's resting on some really fragile, wobbly realities, right? So that picture that you were painting here could fall apart if we don't get some of the core dimensions right. So I'm just wondering, do you have benchmarks in terms of knowing whether, from Siemens' perspective, or your industry, you have a lot of partners in this, your industry's perspective, whether you're losing or winning when it compared to China, compared to India, compared to others that seem to have just less difficulty moving their workforces in a direction than we do?
Yeah, I think we're still building towards that, but let me answer your question by focusing on a program that we have, Electrical Jobs Training Program in North Carolina. And I could explain
What's it
why
called?
we're in North
Is this
Electrical
the
Jobs
Siemens
Training
Power
Program.
Academy or no?
This is something different.
Okay.
This is the Siemens Foundation. And so the way that we got into that was to start out by saying, what's happening in the economy? AI is certainly a huge driver of that. What are the prerequisites to building out and reshoring manufacturing in this country, to building out data systems and the electrical needs? And when you focus on what those electrical jobs that are available are, I already quoted the statistics, they're going to be wide open for a series of years. So then you ask yourself, well, where are the ecosystems? Where are the places in the country that are getting stuff done? And that's not easy to find at times, right? There are places that are doing it better than others. North Carolina is a place we've had some.
This is my friend from North. Will you just
Yep.
stand up so people know? Because we keep pointing at you, but they have no idea who you are. So he's the chancellor of, right now, and I'm going to get this right, the chancellor of, can you tell
Wake
us?
Tech, yeah, of Wake Tech. But
Wake Technical Community College, 70,000 students. You have all your hair, which is remarkable. But I mean, I find it, just an interesting challenge that we're going to get into in a moment about how you kind of deal with, scale of, new people coming into this and get this equation right. So go on.
So as we did our research, we looked for healthy ecosystems.
Right.
And what we've got there is in the North Carolina Business Committee for Education, Caroline Sullivan is also here, but they're a nonprofit based in the governor's office, have been for 40 years, And they are really a coordinator. And the governor, past governor, current governor, is acutely aware on a day in and day basis what's happening. They weave together the business community, labor community, education community. Think about where the hot spots for training are going to be, where are marginalized communities that could benefit from this, et cetera. They're there doing all of that and very closely engaging high school students as well, because we're moving back. We've got to move back in this country into the high school to help people understand what those opportunities are. We've got Wake Tech and 10 other community colleges who are developing curriculum, not just for the fully electrician curriculum, but all of the technical jobs that fall below that, which are quite wide. They're expanding that, they're deepening that. We've got the EVITP up in Detroit, who is a fast track, they're not in the audience today, but they really do fast track training of electrical jobs. And the final piece, which I think is critical to note, is we've got the Family and Workers Fund involved. And the Family and Workers Fund is a huge consortium of funders that are providing supports to potential workers to help them get childcare, transportation, et cetera, the things you need to make that transition.
So I just met the editor-in-chief of FedScoop right here. Do you have a question for him? Maybe you might want to ask him which parts of the government he likes and which ones he doesn't. But I don't know. But let's go right here, bring this to the mic here. I'm glad you're here this morning.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question, Steve. Would love your thoughts on that. But I also am interested in kind of the interplay, maybe elaborating on kind of how you do work with, the technical schools, all sorts of higher education institutions to make sure that the country is in a good spot.
Yeah, I think there's several points that I think the first thing that pops up for me is, and I hope that the folks in the room would agree, what we really look for is a true partnership. So most of what I'm talking about on stage here and in other venues comes from constant conversation with these folks and their teams. They've educated me on this topic in real time. They run into issues with the performance-based contracts that we have. They call us and say we're having this kind of issue. So it's a true respect of understanding the role and the drive and sitting down together with, we have, as I mentioned, performance-based contracts on a quarterly basis that say how many folks do you think you will enroll? How many folks actually stayed with that program? What was the dollar value of their income leap from one time to the other? We don't impose that. That's an objective that we have together, but I'd say that partnership is key.
So what does Scott Ralls do in North Carolina that makes him stand out so much as compared to others you might want to work with in the future?
Two things, again, jump out. Scott drives performance in his organization, not in a tops-down way, but in a way that people understand we're respecting, we've got to drive and perform this. And if you're down there, you'll see students always first and foremost in the minds of Steve and his instructors. So that's one thing. And then across the state of North Carolina, I think they've got 3 consecutive years CNBC, best state to do business. They work together across these sectors in ways that most of us in various states wish that we would do. They've figured out how they support each other and follow through.
I'm going to do this next part a little different. Jay, I'm going to bring you up right now. Jay Timmons, please welcome Jay Timmons to my show, the Steve Clemons Show, President and CEO of the National Association of Manufacturers. Will you join our conversation for a second? And then we'll get rid of you in a minute. But I want to ask you both, and Jay, it's great to have you here. But as we're talking about this, we're sitting in Washington, D.C. There is a policy dimension to this. Both of you, you're a private foundation that's making very big investments in the workforce. Jay, more than anyone else I've known, you've brought manufacturing back. So one of the things that's sort of out there is I remember we've done programs before where there was a stigma attached to manufacturing in America, that it was looked at as a dead-end job as we saw America hollowed out. This is now changing, and you have it coming back. But I want to ask you both, to start with Jay and David, what do you most need from this town, from the administration and from Congress, to get the environment right so that you can succeed better? Jay?
Yeah, well, not just only on the technology front. I think you have to look at kind of the work that this administration has done over the course of the last year, which I think has been extremely positive. If you look back on 2017 and the tax reform plan that was put in place, the president actually announced his plan at our board meeting. And he said at the time it would be rocket fuel, and it really was. And that was very important in terms of investment opportunities and job creation. Regulatory certainty and modernization is important. Energy policy, we're very pleased that the administration is focused on energy. They call it energy dominance. That is going to be incredibly important for AI factories and data centers. And then we also have to look at, what does the workforce look like in the future? As David was just saying, it's about encouraging folks in high school, but I would even say junior high and even elementary school, to understand what modern manufacturing is about. One of the questions you ask is, what's the definition of success? We instituted through our Manufacturing Institute, and I think you're going to bring Carolyn out here in a second. You guys are on the road together a lot, David. We had a campaign called Creators Wanted to kind of inspire that next generation. And we had a data point that showed when we started that campaign, only 25%, to your point about it's your neighbor's kid's job, 25% of parents would recommend manufacturing as a career for their kids. After that campaign, and we showed not just kids, but their parents, what modern manufacturing was all about.
Right.
That number went up to 40%. It took a little bit of time to do that. So it is a constant battle of making sure that everybody understands what manufacturing is about. Now, when the president talks about manufacturing, sometimes I get a kick out of it because sometimes it's maybe just a little Mad Men 1950s version of manufacturing. We want everybody to know what manufacturing is really all about, why it's modern, why it's sleek, why it's technology driven, and very different from my grandfather was in manufacturing, right? And almost 100 years ago now. Completely different. And today, manufacturing is really taking us to a new level in this country.
So the AI adapted worker is very different than we had before, but it also raised an important question, which I'd love to get just a quick snapshot from both of you, which is, and Mike Rounds, Senator Rounds was, getting next to this. There are certain elements of this. He put a very big emphasis on we need much, much, much more legal immigration in this country. So he didn't say illegal, but legal immigration. And I talked to him offline, and he basically, has some challenges on the tariff front. Is the vision that we want to see by way of workers and manufacturing investment and the flow of goods and products, and really the reindustrialization of America, is it possible with, President Trump didn't just turn on Trumps, because Biden had Trumps, and Trump had tariffs. We always had tariffs. It's just he's leaning in a lot more on it. Can these worlds coexist? David?
Yeah, to the extent the question is about demographics and the need for hiring, right? That was actually going to be my answer to your previous question, which is, what do you need from Washington? Understanding that as sexy as it is to talk about AI and about reshoring manufacturing and data centers and all that's out there, there are prerequisites here. And I won't say failing, but we're struggling. We're in a D right now in our prerequisites of engaging everybody in this economy.
We're a D.
I'd say we're at a D. If you look at what the needs are for the next decade or so in terms of training folks, this is everybody who's on the bench has to get in the game, or it does not work. And that means figuring out how to support workers who have traditionally been left out, and making sure that we do it well.
Jay?
I'm going to try to tackle every one of those things you just mentioned in 30 seconds or less. So first and foremost, when we're talking about energy, we do have to have, we just released a report today, you might have read about it a little bit earlier today, but it talks about the need for increased energy supply in this country. And one of the key factors in that is going to be permitting reform. So I had a chance to talk to the senator backstage as well and mention that we need permitting reform if we're going to really build these AI factories of the future. On the workforce,
he doesn't disagree.
No, he does not. No. And I don't think anybody disagrees, right? It's just how we get there.
Right.
When it comes to workforce and it comes to immigration, we've been pushing immigration reform for years. This administration, I think, probably uniquely understands the economic connection to legal immigration, and we're going to be working with them to try to make sure that we have a plan moving forward. And on trade, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that tariffs are helping manufacturers right now, but if we are addressing imbalances or we're addressing bad practices in other countries, that's a good thing. That's where I think tariff policy can come into play. But one thing we have to think about, and I think this is becoming more and more evident as we attempt to build more factories, we can only produce about 84%, this is a number that we produced, about 84% of the critical inputs necessary to build a new factory in this country today. That means
Right.
a minimum of 16% of inputs, so think machines.
Minimum, yeah.
A minimum.
Yeah.
Think machines and
Right.
critical minerals, they have to be imported. If
Mm-hmm.
those things have tariffs on them, it makes it more expensive to build that new capacity here. So we're looking to some sort of a
Right.
speed pass for those critical inputs so that we can build that manufacturing capacity.
Well, David, thank you for stopping by the Siemens Widehall show today. Let's have a big round of applause for David Etzwiler, CEO of the Siemens Foundation. Jay, why don't you stick with us here? Now I want to invite this real maestro. You can stay there. I want to invite Carolyn Lee, who's president of the Manufacturing Institute, happens to work with Jay in the National Association of Manufacturing. And Carolyn, I wanted to kind of do this in this way because I like mixing up people, and I wanted to see if Jay could hang with David Etzwiler, but I think he did a good job.
I have a harder time hanging with Carolyn
Yeah,
because
Carolyn-
she's the smarts in the room.
Yeah, you are well known for basically part of this thing of bringing, thinking about the ecosystem that creates healthy, vibrant environment for manufacturing to come back and to thrive in this country. And today we're talking about workforce. And we happened to have dinner. I'll be honest, folks, we had dinner last night. I was so impressed with your kind of no BS approach to what we have to get right. And so I'd like you to give us a snapshot of that, of where you think we've been derelict, not really on the mark, and what we have to do to get, to get this workforce of the future ready and in place, particularly when it comes to this coming age of AI.
Yeah, that's a great setup, Stephen. Thank you. I do appreciate I do try to follow that no BS. So here's the thing: we have too much of a challenge ahead of us. One of the things the MI is best known for, in addition to being the workforce affiliate for the National Association of Manufacturers, is a talent study that we do regularly with Deloitte. And our most recent, which we released in May of 24, found that we need to fill 3.8 million jobs by 2033. Of that, half of them would go unfilled because we don't have the people with the skills, right? So, spoiler alert, it's been about half of all the open jobs. Every time we do this report, it ends up being that we need about 4 million people, half of them won't go filled. And so what we need to do is really bring everybody out. Somebody said this morning, I think it was a senator, we need everybody on the field. And we need we need rational immigration, so the policy, so that we can bring the best and the brightest from around the world. But what we need to do is help people see, and Jay just spoke to this, that this is manufacturing is a great place to build a future. It's a great career, and it's a great pathway to prosperity. We have to change the narrative around manufacturing. Part of that is seeing facilities like Siemens that are, bright and clean and full of technology. And we know that the students today actually gravitate to that, right? They're digital natives. I'm not. Most of us in this room are probably not. So how do we lean into that and let them see that there's an opportunity for them? And in doing so, they're strengthening their communities. Now, if we don't do that, that's when you end up seeing, degradation in your communities. You see that manufacturers can't compete. So the people are at the center. So I love the conversation about AI and how it's going to change the tasks and the jobs. Absolutely. Every evolution of technology and manufacturing has changed the tasks that we do. It's called the Industrial Revolution, everything since. And so this is just happening again at a much faster clip for sure. But just actually recently, the American University put out a study, a poll, that they found that actually the students who use AI are more optimistic about their future in business and jobs because they understand the technology. So we need to not set this up as it's a black or white, right, on or off. It's not. There is no single switch. It is about learning the skills. It's about adapting. It's making sure that manufacturing and our communities can be competitive. And we just got to lean into this and make sure that we're skilling. But to your point on the ecosystem, none of us can do this alone. All of us need to come together. David just talked eloquently about what's happening in North Carolina. I was just there last week with the governor at an event in Raleigh, and it's a terrific ecosystem. There's great work going on all over the state, but
Right.
as much as the policymakers, and it's hard to say this when we're in DC, and I said this to you last night, as much as policy can enable this, policy is not going to solve this. We need to have employers first driving the agenda, working with the educational institutions to make sure that our education partners understand what is happening in our industries and training to those needs. We run the most successful multi-employer apprenticeship program that's operating now in 20 states, and it continues to grow. It's actually growing almost faster than we can manage because companies see that coming together to build the solutions and train the common core of the workforce is good for all of us, because in manufacturing, eventually, we're each other's suppliers or customers. And so we all got to rise together.
How many of you go to any of the digital super summits like Web Summit or these? Does anybody go to Web Summit? Lisbon? Well, you guys got to get out more. It's in Lisbon. You've got one in Lisbon, Vancouver, one in Rio de Janeiro, one in Doha. But these are super summits of the younger generation, digitality, right? They are 100,000 people in Lisbon. I go moderate there, and I'll moderate, interview the CEO of GitHub or various places that are very much in the AI space. And you realize we're meeting the people we're talking about. Maybe they're slightly older because they're not high school, but they see themselves as entrepreneurs, problem solvers, bringing their skills to solving problems, and they are part of what we're talking about, the AI for real crowd. I'm interested in the tension, if there is tension, between this crowd, which somehow seems to be evolving out there, and getting them connected to manufacturing, getting them connected into your sector, Jay. What's the bridge there?
Well, if you think about every iteration of technology, it's manufacturers that have really been in the driver's seat in developing that technology as well as deploying that technology. So eventually, I've never actually had that question before, but eventually those two things will meet. And one of the things that I love most about Carolyn is how humble she is, because quite frankly, the Manufacturing Institute is a lot more than just talking about the problem. We're all talking about the problem, right? We know what the problem is. But what the Institute is doing is it's really boots on the ground, as she just mentioned, in states all across the country. And that's what you need to be able to make the connection that you're talking about, showing that not only can these products and these new technologies be developed, but we have the people, and we're recruiting the people that can actually implement them on the shop floor.
Can I just add one thing? So you raised problem solving. That is one of those critical human skills that is going to be more in demand when AI is more prolific. Now, let's be clear, AI is already being used in manufacturing, has been for a long time.
It's about 50, the Manufacturing Leadership Council says about 50% of manufacturers today use AI in their operations. That number will increase to 60% by 2027 and 80% by 2030. So
that's right.
That's why Carolyn's work is so important, right?
But they're not necessarily using it on the production floor, and production level employees aren't using it, and that's one of the biggest barriers to deployment of AI technologies. And remember, AI is a tool. It's not this like magical, mythical thing, right? It is a tool used for certain tasks, and you can apply it. It's like the internet. Now I'm sounding like an old person explaining AI for dummies, but the reality is how are you deploying the tool will depend on the need and the problem you're trying to solve. Humans are at the center of then solving those problems. So when we go out and we talk to students, and I've done this all month because this is manufacturing month, we're having this conversation with students about problem solving and teamwork and communication and collaboration. And those are the things that are central to manufacturing jobs today. Oh, and technical skills that then you continue to build on and have lifelong learning throughout your career. That's all appealing. We just got to get the message out wider.
One of the things I want to do, I want to find out if there are any questions for this great team here. We've got a question right here, Sammy, go back here. But I want to ask David real quickly, you do modules, right? You do training modules, you offer training modules there. I think that Carolyn was very upfront that she's not one of these wired children of the AI children of the future. I want to take that module. I want to take it. Can we do it online? Can we get exposed to it online? Will you give us a free pass?
Yeah, this relates to one of the lessons that's come back from our partners, which is we started out on some preliminary work in electric vehicle manufacturing and installation, right? Heavy electrical. And one of the first things they did is come back to us and say, you got to have multiple on-ramps, we got to have multiple off-ramps, right? The original design for what we were doing was very linear. And what they said is you got to meet people where they are. That's right. And where they are is all over the place.
So I want to do digital
and where they're going
stuff.
is all over the place.
I want the Siemens digital twin box. is module. Is that okay?
You can have it.
Okay, that's great. What would you do?
I'm not sure we can handle two, Steve.
Yeah, right? No, what I would say is exactly that, but we need the foundational fundamentals, and that's what we found in
Right.
our research from the NAM's Manufacturing Leadership Council, showed that actually the production, the biggest barrier is a lack of skills. So we're now looking at how do we go out and make sure that they have those skills, so that the fear factor is reduced, so that the familiarity is available and there, so that when this comes on, and one of the best places to do this, the most clear, one of the most obvious applications for AI in manufacturing on production is actually maintenance technicians, right? And we happen to run a maintenance technician apprenticeship
Wow.
program. So then, which is hugely successful. So then how do you take that and embed it there to
Right.
make sure that we are ready to meet those needs as this continues to evolve?
Now let's get your question. Tell us who you are.
Yes, good morning. My name is Veli Sando, and I'm with Advanced CTE. So there's been a lot that has been done around changing the messaging and narrative around these job opportunities. But I wonder if you think that there's also a need to instill in the current and future generations to come a responsibility or a duty to fill this workforce needs as well. And if not, do you think that efficiency in the current efforts are sufficient to making sure that we meet those job demands?
Great question. Jay?
Yeah.
Oh, Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, and Advanced CT is doing great work and is a tremendous part of the ecosystem and helping us see what those career pathways are. So thank you for all that you guys are doing. Yes, we have to instill, we have to help people see. You know, Manufacturing Month is all about having people open the doors. I started this month actually in North Carolina at a biomanufacturing company, and they brought in 300 local 10th grade students to tour and to see for themselves what they do I was at Nova Nessus, what they do and how that actually those enzymes and proteins that they make, how that makes all the products that we use every day better. The role in, right? And once you apply that, and I was on these tours, and the more I went, the more I learned, right? Because hearing it a few times, and they say, oh wait, hold on, this is something, my detergent works better and in cold water, which is better for the environment and my fabric, my clothes come out better because they're not as worn from hot, water cycles. And this is what we can do locally in our community to have these jobs and to build my community, my family, right, and strengthen these companies. And so you heard it from the senator, how do we attract these people and keep them there? And getting to see for themselves from people who look like them, who have experience from, that's relevant to them, maybe from their high school, younger workers, that voice are the most important voices to help students see that there's a future for them
Did
in
you notice she
manufacturing.
used a water metaphor? It's not
I
surfing,
did.
but it was
Yeah.
washing. But Jay, final word?
So I just want to thank you for that question, because it's certainly all about the tremendous job opportunities of the future and being able to show these young people what is available to them in their futures. But I also think it's important to look at what manufacturing has meant for the might of this nation. And frankly, manufacturing has saved the world many times over. I think back to the arsenal of democracy in World War I, World War II. Think of all of the incredible advancements that pharmaceutical and medical manufacturers have made over the years, from polio vaccine all the way to COVID, and how we have saved the world in terms of our public health. Think in terms of food and beverage manufacturers and how we've increased the food supply to help feed more people around the world. So that imperative, if you will, I agree with you. I think it's very important to make sure that young people understand the contributions that manufacturing has made to improve the world and improve quality of life everywhere, and what future possibilities exist.
Well, listen, I want to give a big round of applause to Jay Timmons, President and CEO of the National Association of Manufacturers. Thank you. Carolyn, will you stay here? Will you sit and join us here?
Sure.
Jay, thank you so much. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate it. Now let me invite to the stage my good friend Victoria Espinel, who's CEO of the Business Software Alliance. Victoria, please come join us. Do you know Carolyn?
Nice to see you.
Great. So I just figured we might as well, she's my Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson. Does anybody remember that show? I like having a partner to do this. What question would you ask the head of the Business Software Alliance about the future?
So, been busy lately? No, it's...
Use the mic.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. I was going to say, we've all been busy with these things. So as your part of the sector is looking at this, what is the tipping point on workforce for you?
So, so just to step back for a moment and talk about why we think workforce training is so not important, absolutely essential. There's a lot of conversation about winning the AI race. And there's a lot of conversation here in Washington about that. But there's a lot of conversation around the world. Governments around the world are focused on, are we going to win the AI race? And a lot of that is focused on investment in R&D and sovereign LLM models. And that is important, and I understand why there's a lot of government focus on that. But I will tell you that I don't think that is the key to winning the AI race. I think the countries that win the AI race are going to be the ones that figure out widespread AI adoption. They're going to figure out how to create an environment where their private sector, including their manufacturing companies,
power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the private sectors that are using AI efficiently to globally compete 10 years from now, those are the countries that we're going to look at and say they won the AI race.
So
That's
Victoria,
the AI race we need
So let me
to
ask you
win.
a question. You've done a fantastic job at BSA, but I remember in 1999, when I helped launch the New America Foundation back then, one of our first grants was from the Markle Foundation. They gave us $1 million. I don't know how much $1 million is in 1999 dollars, but it was a lot today. And it was to help people conceptualize how their future was going to change from broadband, from being connected. You weren't doing AOL discs and paid service subscription fees. You're going to be on all the time, 24/7. It was really hard to imagine that world was coming. But it was sort of like this moment where it was, again, come back. It was a tsunami that covered everything. But we were sitting here in Washington trying to figure out, oh, you lawyers, your world is going to change. Or, oh, you trade advocacy groups, your world is going to change. Or how we did everything in processed information is going to change. Are we back at that moment where we actually need workshops to help people understand what that immersive AI is going to do and how to use it? So I agree 1,000% with what you said. But I have to tell you, there are not a lot of people that have a concept for how the world will look 5 years from now in that world.
I was going to say, so it's hard to imagine the future. My answer to that would be yes, but more. And I think, so we at BSA recently launched an AI adoption agenda, and we made workforce training one of only 3 pillars. So and we made it the top pillar, the
top
number
pillar?
one, because I think it is literally impossible to have widespread AI adoption unless you have a skilled workforce. And I think that's a real challenge for us right now. Siemens actually recently released a report where they said manufacturing companies, 92% of them don't have a skilled AI workforce. That's a real problem, and that's the race that we have to win. So, we have a number of specific ideas of things that we would ask the government to do. We have a number of specific things that our companies are doing. I'm happy to talk about that. But I think there's a lot of really concrete things that could happen right now that would help us.
What are the other 2 pillars?
The infrastructure and data, and then like a governance framework that's going to actually work.
So go ahead, Carolyn.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay, I was going to say in the manufacturing area, one of the things I'm really interested in. So we talk a lot about workforce and not getting there, and so Senator Rounds said you've got to appeal to the itch of high school students, of young people. You've got to find a way to make them to want this world. And I sort of feel, in the world of gaming, and, I do delve into TikTok, even though the senator doesn't like it. But, I do it because I want to get a taste and feel for what a younger generation of people is feeling, what their currency is, for what they're enthusiastic about, what they get into. And does that world help inform, is that world going to generate the kind of, AI-ready folks that we need in our industry?
I mean, I think I have 3 teenagers, and I guess one's technically a preteen.
Do you
but anyway,
understand them?
I do. Well, they do explain things to me. They have to sit down
Slowly?
and say, "Mom, okay, hold on. This is what 6'7" is."
6'7".
Yeah. So we have lots of conversations, usually in the car. And the thing is that actually I started having this conversation on Monday with another group. Actually, I think a really interesting, as far as AI readiness is, you have this divide starting, because we see report after report of schools saying we don't want students using AI, which I understand. I want my kids to learn how to think and problem solve, but I want them to know how to use it as a tool.
Right.
And then you have other schools that is full immersive. So we're going to have this divide between students coming up and their own familiarity. So I said a few minutes ago, we know that on production floors, workers aren't using AI or aren't familiar, and that's one of the biggest barriers to deployment of AI in production. Now it's being used in R&D and vision systems, right, and planning and data analysis. Of course, manufacturers are using AI there. but how do you bring it to production? We got to close the gap. We got to have people see its relevancy and its use cases and make them familiar with it. Because if you just dropped, somebody into, I mean, what you said about in the late 90s, right? When we were thinking about, okay, this is what broadband's going to do. We never imagined influencers. Like, that wasn't a thing. Like, nobody would have imagined that was going to be a job. And so
I was
how
an
do
early
we,
influencer.
well, in a whole different, but in real life, right?
Yeah.
You were a real life influencer.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't conceive all of the use cases. So you have to start getting people comfortable and bringing them in and closing that gap, so then these things can develop and
This
evolve.
is making me think of something.
I agree
go
with
ahead.
all of that, and I think it's really important the training be specific often and tailored to roles. So I heard David say, I was back there and I was thinking, we have to meet people where they are. And then I heard David say, we have to meet people where we are. And I'm like, wow, I have my own Siemens digital twin, like right here. This is amazing.
Well, I am into digital. I mean, for those of you who don't follow digital twins, it gives you the ability and tools to model, and design something, in incredible specificity in digital space, which you can turn into. And it's one of the things you see if you want to come in, model, if my friend Melody Thomas wants to remodel her living room, essentially you're creating a digital twin of that space and coming in, or real estate or automotive, or really it's the visioning tools that can really do it. And I have to admit, I mean, I love Siemens, but this is the new Siemens. The Siemens is this tech company that's got these, various interesting tech tools. But it's taught me something as we kind of talk a lot about AI very generically. And I want to tell you, it's a mistake I think many of us are making, is that industry jobs, digital jobs, every industry. We had a dinner the other night with another major aerospace company around this same subject. And the jobs and tools are going to be different. But I want to challenge Dave, and I want to challenge my friends at Siemens and BSA and NAM. We should do some modules someday where we can actually show very specifically what an AI empowered worker looks like, what that feels like, what it does. Because I think that would do more in the policy community to educate people the tangibility and traction of that. So would you do that?
So I'm actually doing a panel this afternoon. I would invite all of you to come at the showroom, and it's going to be me with Steve Lamar of the apparel manufacturers, Amanda Eversole, who's the head of the Financial Services Roundtable, and Michelle Corsmo of the National Restaurant Association.
And where's it going to be?
It's going to be at the showroom. We're going to be 2 p.m. And we're going to be talking specifically about...
They can just show up and drop your name, Victoria
just show up,
Espinel.
exactly. All are welcome, and we'll have food and drink.
FOV.
But the point of the panel is to talk specifically in concrete ways about how AI is being used by workers in those industries. Because I think financial services, okay, but like apparel manufacturing, restaurants are also using AI, and I think people don't understand that. And so the whole point of this panel is to be very concrete about what we need there, but also how it is being used by workers in those industries. So yes, come on by.
I'm going to try to stop by at 2, but if not, would do, because I do think that would be an incredibly useful.
We need more of that.
And look at electrification, look at the changes on the shop floor, look at the whole changes across the sector, which would be very good. Would you be up for a show and tell?
Oh, absolutely. More to come.
That would be fantastic. Yes.
So let me just ask again the question I always like to ask in DC, Victoria. This town can help or hurt. And I remember, again, a story once when I was at the Atlantic. We had a dinner with some of the founders of Google, so you probably know who they are, some other folks in the high tech, very, very high on tech. And they said, we may get the technology that we can actually end death someday. And somebody in the room said, well, that's going to be really, really bad for entitlements. And of course, that's supposed to get a laugh, but I mention it because one of the things I'm interested in is it was very clear that Silicon Valley and the sort of advanced generation world sort of look at themselves as the tech innovators. We're talking about innovation today coming in, and they look at Washington as a lag effect, as a drag, as a regulator, as something that's behind the times. So I'm interested in what can Washington do that helps, and what can Washington do that does not hurt, Victoria?
So I think we should, let's stay on workforce training. I think there's a lot that Washington can do to help. I think this is something that this administration is focused on. They've put a big emphasis on AI education. BSA and 15 of our member companies have signed up for the Presidential AI Challenge. And actually, our foundation, software.org, just last week launched a toolkit publicly, check it out on our website, to help student and educators and companies participate in the Presidential AI Challenge. So if you're interested in that, please go take a look. But I think in workforce training, there's a lot that the government can do. You know, the private sector, the government's job is to look out for the citizens of our country as a whole. And I think there's no greater need that we have right now than workforce training. There are other needs as well, but I don't think there's anything more important to our economic future, and I think that is a place where the government can and wants to be helpful.
Carolyn, I'm going to bring up the chancellor of a huge community college, and of course we were last night with another chancellor of another huge community college. Between them, they have 140,000 students, and so when the president is talking about wanting 1 million apprenticeships in over a certain period, I don't know if it's a yearly or thing like that. We got 14% between them. We can do this, but I'd be interested, just real quick snapshot, final word on what we can do to really enhance that interactivity and cooperation with our technical colleges, with our community colleges, with people there that are moving to get ahead and they want to be armed. I know it's on your map, and I think many of us don't understand, those tangible connections. So,
I think it goes to your last question too, to Victoria. Look, government can help make sure that it's industry-led training and evolution. And like the change in the big beautiful bill of having a Pell Grant for short-term training was excellent. We've been advocating for that for years. It's great to see that finally done. But government ensuring that the industry is driving the train on what is the training, and then industry, and this is what we do in our FAME model, is we work, and FAME is a living model of a cohort building exercise with our local community and technical schools to train for what industry is saying we need. It's to make sure that industry is there as an active partner. It's not back when my grandfather came in and machinist was a machinist. It is so dynamic and evolving that we need a living model of education and learning where industry and education needs to lock arms. And the good news is it's not one and done. You're coming back for more and more. And so that is how we solve this, is to make sure that industry is at the table and our voices are heard, because we cannot expect that the spigot will just open and people will land in our laps and have the training that we need. So we have to be active partners in leading this, and where we are is very successful.
Let's give a big round of applause and thank Carolyn Lee, president of the Manufacturing Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. Victoria, will you stay here and join us in this chair right over here? All right, now let me invite to the show Scott Ralls, who's president of Wake Technical Community College, much referenced this morning from North Carolina. North Carolina is large. Scott, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. So, we've taken your name in vain several times this morning. I hope it's gone okay for you. But look, have you met Victoria Espinel before?
Hey.
This may be the most important introduction you have had this year. Victoria is, one of the great leaders in the sort of, I would call the kind of broad digital movement. They say software, but it's the broad digital dimension of kind of looking at what the smart policy environment is. And as you heard, one of her big pillars is looking at workforce. You've got an engine of generating talent. And I don't know how you have a board that rewards or punishes you based on how well you're doing with your 70,000 students, right? Whether they're filling these workplaces. But I'd love to get your North Star when you're kind of looking at technical community college. How do you know, I'll ask you the same thing, how do you know when you're winning? How do you know when your board is happy with you? How do you know when you're regressing and going the wrong direction?
Well, our North Star at Wake Tech's economic mobility, which can also be phrased as the American dream working. And so we live in a unique community. We have Wake County, Raleigh region last year was ranked in one ranking the #1 economic opportunity region in the country. We've also been ranked by Raj Chetty at Harvard University among the bottom 10 cities in economic mobility. So we kind of challenge our folks to take that personally. That's our unique role at Wake Tech. And so for us, it's about how you move students up. Now, sometimes it's tough to figure out, things like how wages match after they leave, but we can watch when they, particularly first year to second year, are they connected? The fact that we now have 162 apprenticeship partnerships with Wake County employers when we only had 15 5 years ago, that's a metric that we look to. So we have to look for the sub-metrics, but we're paying attention to everybody participating in a very strong labor market.
Let me ask you what I asked David. Some of us have been around long enough that we remember the era that we used to sort of fake workforce training or retraining. We had called it trade adjustment assistance from trade impacts, et cetera. You're working with the Siemens Foundation, and Siemens Educates America and its labs, et cetera. What do you think is going more right today than used to go in this field?
Well, I think we have a long way to go. I think one of the things that we're doing is really marrying together workforce development, or what has been called workforce training, with academic degree programs. And those have often been in different worlds. Even in Washington, they've been in different worlds. And so we talk a lot about laddering. We want our students to ladder up, go from rung to rung. We've got to make sure they know what the next rung is. And if you only focus on short-term workforce training, which is what most working adults need to get that job and get in the workplace, but it doesn't often lead to career mobility unless it does connect to degrees. Now, I know there's a lot of focus on skills-based hiring. I believe in skills-based hiring. HR departments don't believe a whole lot in skills-based hiring, so you have to kind of work for students to get from rung to rung to rung. So I think one of the things we have uniquely been doing is trying to bring those things together, how we're organized as a college, how we connect. I think that's where Workforce Pell has such opportunity, because we can use that short-term accelerator, get a certification, get a job, but get credit to keep moving up. And so if we can help students get rung to rung, then that leads to career mobility, credential mobility, that leads to economic mobility.
So let me ask you both, Victoria, one of my, Nancy Lamond. So for those of you who don't know Nancy Lamond, she's the executive vice president of the AARP, American Association of Retired People. And I always ask, what's the future of retirement? She says, the future of retirement is work. That we have people who, for various economic reasons, are going to have to stay in the workforce. And I'm always interested broadly in why this country has a stigma attached to lifelong learning, ongoing education. But one of the things I've learned about the Siemens programs and many of the Google program, the Cisco programs, you're taking incumbent workers and you're telling them, hey, we're going to upskill you, we're going to bring you along. So it's not just those that are from age perspective in high school going on, and even at Wake, you have many people at different stages. So I'm wondering, one, what are we doing in that front of kind of looking at, I would call it intergenerational ongoing learning and advancement, and making that a norm and not an exception? And is that part of your pillar?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'll say my mom's from North Carolina, so I'm a big fan. Winston-Salem, Good
place.
So yes, and in fact, when we think about workforce training, there's a lot of focus on K through 12, and rightfully so. But we actually have not focused on that as much because there are already groups focusing on that. I think it's people that are already in the workforce at all different levels. So that could be entry-level workers.
That's where a lot of the anxiety is that people feel.
Exactly, and I think that's, and then people that are further along in their careers, you see that anxiety increase. So I think those are the workers that we need to be targeting to make sure that they are comfortable, that they have the skills. And I just want to say on your point of laddering, I think we've tried to do a lot of work with our companies to not require college degrees for jobs that do not require college degrees. But I also agree with what you say in terms of career mobility, having the flexibility to have the academic credential along with the training, I think is very important.
So Scott, how do you do it?
Well, a third of our students have a college degree, have a 4-year degree or higher. So I think
1/3 of your 70,000.
Yeah, because the majority of our students are in non-degree programs. They're coming for skills training. We're like a graduate school in that capacity. And that doesn't that does not mean a 4-year degree is not valuable. It just means you need the skills that we're providing to get the job or to make the job transition to make that work. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to get out of the either-or worlds. We think either-or, and that's the way it always used to be. You either went to university or you went to community college. Well, it's an and world. And the more we can promote the ands, I think that's where the secret is, and build the ladders. It's not you go one direction or the other.
We heard a data point on stage here today which deeply disturbed me, and I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it came from Jay or whatever, but 92% of American corporations are not sort of AI ready or using AI in the workforce. Is that your read as well, Scott?
I think we're still defining what AI ready means, and I think AI ready 3 years from now will mean something very different. But it doesn't mean we don't move forward. For us at Wake Tech, it means we have to create a baseline. We have to focus on AI literacy right now. There are two words for us that are very important. One is we say threaded AI. We have to thread AI into all of our programs. We have to make our students competitive. You used the surfing example. Our students have to be on the top of the wave, not the bottom of the wave. And if they are not using AI competitively, we're not making them competitive as they move on.
I can't tell you how happy I am that you use a surfer.
Well, we've been using that for years in different technologies.
This is
you know,
great.
so it's the other thing though is going back to critical thinking. You know, we have another, we call it solve it, say it. We have to make sure that students, people, use AI as a tool and not a crutch. And that's where critical thinking comes in and how you use that. So we have to focus on the what's. They have to be using AI in a variety of programs. Those that are most at threat of being automated, they're the ones that are most highly motivated right now. But all the programs in terms of competitiveness, but then also how you are thinking critically. How are you using AI? That's going to be very important. I think that's going to be very baseline in terms of AI readiness as well.
I also think that threading will help people recognize that AI is a tool that they can use, as opposed to this like separate thing over there that they have to be worried about. So I think that that's very helpful.
Any quick questions for our team here real quick? Well, you know, let me just, oh yeah, right here, right in the back.
Peter Beard with the U.S. Chamber Foundation. So it's directed to you, Chancellor, which is how do you develop the programs in partnership with employers? I mean, kind of going to where Carolyn was going in terms of the FAME program.
Well, we have to.
I think it's really interesting. Like technically, like how do you do it, right? Yeah. So
we have to, and I attempt personally to be engaged with an employer, one or more every day. But we have to be engaged with our employers.
So is this your Siemens day?
This will count as Siemens.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
This will count as Siemens. But you know, for us too, we're a little different. We have a much better admissions rate than some of the colleges around us. Duke University only takes 5% of the students who apply. We take the top 100%. What that means for us, though, is the most important day for our students is when they walk across that graduation stage. And if we haven't hit those employer targets or those university targets where they're transferring, then we've done our students a disservice. We have to partner with our employer partners because our students, our relevance as a college, as an institution, is based on their opportunities after us. We're not a to college. We're a through college that students are trying to get to their next place. So it's incumbent on us. It is our philosophy. We have to do that as a community college.
Victoria, do you have a closing zinger?
So Singapore, I think, has done a great job of working with its private sector to understand like what jobs they're going to need in 5 years, and then shape the education system to meet that need. We're not Singapore, right? It's a very different government. But I will say, it's a little geeky, but I think our federal data workforce, our data on the workforce in the United States is very hard to access. It's not modernized. It lags behind, and that's a problem that we have. So I realize that is a little geeky, but I think having actual relatively up-to-date, accurate data on the workforce and the workforce needs that we have, I think that would be really, really helpful to workers and to the private sector, and perhaps that is yet another thing that the government could help us with.
Well, Victoria, thank you for joining us. Big round of applause for Victoria Espinel, President and CEO of the Business Software Alliance. Can you stay with us for a few minutes? Victoria, thank you so much. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, jump over here. You know the system now. Let me invite to the stage one of my favorite congressmen, not because he's a great congressman. He is a great congressman to get to, but there's a lot more to him, which we're going to get into in a moment, and his own obsessions with tech, with it. Congressman Bill Foster from Illinois, great to see you again. I love to do this. What a great tie. What's going on there? This is Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright? Yeah, perfect.
So this is my parade tie, actually.
This is your parade tie?
Yeah, it's Frank Lloyd Wright. So
it's an amazing
Illinois
tie, and it fits in. I mean, it looks like an AI tie.
No, but it's also red, white, and blue. So those of my constituents that don't recognize it as Frank Lloyd Wright say, you know, red, white, and blue, go USA.
Oh, this is great.
So it's auto-micro-targeting, as they say in the ad biz.
Well, look, I'm so thrilled you're up here because you're, you are, actually I didn't know, you're co-chair of the Research and Development Caucus, but you're like one of the few former real businessmen, real entrepreneurs, real science people in the Congress, and we've had this conversation before, and I've always found it, you have this tangible side. So you were sort of the AI person or the, the improvement innovation person before it became the current fad. And I want the audience to know that if you go to Theater lighting, half the theater lighting in America is because of his company. So you've likely been, if any of you have gone to the movies, you've been part of this world.
Electronic
right?
theater controls, yeah.
Yeah,
So
electronic
where
theater.
the lights at the Metropolitan Opera and all this.
You're so
I
modest
learned
about it. It's a big deal.
Recently, we hit the ceiling, the top, when it turns out if you go to the Federal Reserve and they have a lighting control system, that's also our company.
That's your
So,
system?
I was at a Federal Reserve.
Is that nepotism
Future
or was
Payments.
that honestly bought?
This was purchased without my knowledge. Actually, I no longer, our company has just completed the transition to an ESOP. So this company, it's our 50th anniversary, and I started this company with my little brother with $500 from my parents. Now has about 1,600 employees, about $450 million a year, and the majority of theater lighting equipment. But when I entered Congress, I had my partners buy me out because I did not want to be casting votes that affected my net worth, which sounds sort of quaint these days, but that's what I did. But we also started the transition to an employee stock ownership program, which completed at the beginning of last year, and it's now 100% owned by the employees that built it, which is a pretty neat exit from.
Well, that's good. That's more than I
That's right.
knew at the beginning of this, so that's good.
Yeah, my temporary exit from politics was a little, I lost in the Tea Party wave election. I spent 2 years in the wilderness. And so when you lose an election, you make a list of everything else you might want to do with the rest of your life. Number 2 on that was to make an AI tutor, basically. And so I realized that neural networks were actually working. I first programmed neural networks back in the 1990s at the particle accelerator lab that I worked at. For various scientific reasons, and they weren't really working. But this was right when the neural networks were showing promise. This was in 2011. And so I actually bought an NVIDIA card that I never used because I decided to return to Congress. But to use it
We could have done a
for-
Netflix show, The AI Guy Goes to Congress.
What? That's right. Or maybe I should. It was a mistake returning to Congress. I should have gotten on the ground floor of AI, and my life would have been different.
Yeah, I think that many of us say that. But let me just start out, you were very concerned about a number of the pieces of the ecosystem. One is science, one's development. I think part of the graphic image I have is when I look at a company like Siemens and I look at what I know it has achieved in the tech space and how committed it is to upskilling its workforce and using lots of different dimensions and kicking a lot of money into that. Yep. You realize that vision could be choked off if this country doesn't figure out how to generate a new wave of a workforce that will fit in that space. So I'm interested in what you feel we need to align better to achieve that, because it seems to me to be an urgent situation, not a casual one.
Oh, that's right. And well, I have spent most of the last 15 years trying to convince young kids to get into computer coding. And if you talk to Silicon Valley computer coders, they can't get jobs. Okay? And this is a huge problem. And, I still do some coding to keep my brain from rotting, and so I've been using these AI coding assistants for the last 3 years.
GitHub and stuff.
Oh, well, no,
Yeah.
this is like Claude Code, and these,
okay.
but these are AI assistants, and they sort of 3 years ago they were a crappy autocomplete where you get halfway through writing your subroutine, and they'd say, "Oh, I see what you're doing. It would complete and close your loops and fix your spelling errors on your variables," and then maybe about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, you wrote the descriptive header of your subroutine and it would go boom and give you all the code for what you just described. And now you describe the whole project. I got interested in this problem that, Elon Musk is going to send up these starships and then put them into low Earth orbit, and so they're up in low Earth orbit. They refuel them with 9 refueling missions, and then they go off to the moon or Mars or wherever he's going to. And so the question arose in my head, what happens if one of those blows up? Because it turns out they blow up pretty frequently. And think of the debris field that happens, all the scrap metal that is now in low Earth orbit and is going to wipe out satellites in low Earth orbit. And so I said, okay, this seems like a good job for a simulation. And so I asked Claude Code to do this. And it was amazing. It went and it found a bunch of NASA is actually worried about rockets blowing up for a while, and so when a rocket blows up on the launch pad, they send people out to measure how far away different scraps of different sizes went. So they have a numerical model of when a rocket ship blows up, how much scraps of stuff. And so they have a Fortran simulation of this, and so Claude Code said, oh, well, I want to translate it to Python and reproduce the results that were published from it, fine. And now we need a simulation. You got this orbital debris field in low Earth orbit, and it will gradually fall out of orbit depending on how big the piece is and how heavy it is. So over the next decades, it will fall out of orbit and just sort of sweep through and wipe out everything else that's in low Earth orbit. And so I had to do this calculation, and it ran all night on my laptop. And at the end of the first 90 days, 2% of all of the Starlink satellites were wiped out.
Scott, can you imagine having this kind of conversation with any other member of Congress?
No, I'm fascinated.
Anybody in the North
but
Carolina delegation, measure up? But let me just, so you
But
just.
the point is that,
Yeah.
if I had a really good postdoc,
Right.
I could give that problem and they'd come back a week later with what I got in half an hour out of Claude Code.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you regret encouraging a lot of people to become coders?
Well, it's not just there, I mean, Siemens.
I mean,
right?
one of the things we're
Siemens,
talking
one of
about today are
Siemens' big
electrification jobs and welding jobs and the different kind of
Yeah.
jobs that didn't have those premiums
And that works
are now
until-
earning huge premiums.
That's right, and the cost of a humanoid robot in China is $6,000. And it's not a state of the art, you probably have to spend twice that to get something that has good hands that can manipulate stuff.
And there are tariffs then, too.
Well, that
Yeah.
is a gun that we can aim at our foot or not.
Yeah.
And that, and there are huge cybersecurity threats with that.
Sure.
You just cannot have, it's not just science fiction. If every self-driving car had its software hacked, it is a huge threat to everything. And so we're going to have very strong rules about, the chain of provenance of all the electronics that are running self-driving cars, robotics, everything. And so I don't mind if the plastic parts and motors are built in China, but the control systems have to be something we have control over. And it's something that Siemens has wrestled with for years. You do a lot of control systems for industrial systems, and if the bad guys get into that software, it's a disaster. And so, we have a lot of cyber vulnerabilities. But the future of that is not people looking for those vulnerabilities. It's an AI that just scans the system and reads every line of code. And
We have Scott here, who's president of the Wake Technical Community College in North Carolina, and I'm sure you interact with your congressional delegation a lot. And what I ask both of you, Scott, I want to ask you is, I look at this as an urgent problem, and the foundation is wobbly in this picture we want to have for ourselves, in this next wave of technological innovation. Although I tell people that, we're on the edge of all these technological innovations constantly, but if Galileo were alive, he'd still be in jail. There's sort of a tension out there between advancement and sort of flat earthers, if you will. But I'm interested in the decibel level of urgency that you have from your Congress, because I know his decibel level of urgency is high on getting a lot of this
or
work.
your kids.
Yeah.
Because they all use these AI tools and say, what am I getting this education for when ChatGPT already knows more about this than I will ever know?
There's definitely an anxiety, and I'll just give you a practical example, which is good and bad. In some of the areas we were talking about earlier, for us, electrical, HVAC, automotive technicians, welding. 10 years ago, we talked about an interest gap. We had programs, we had demand, we didn't have enough students. I'll be a community college president. Next year will be my 24th year. This is the first year I have seen waiting lists, long waiting lists in those areas, which is a good news, bad news story for us. And in talking to people, our advisors, our faculty, a lot of that is about changes that students are worried about with AI and looking more towards careers they weren't considering earlier because they don't see the security of a four-year degree or things we were talking about 4 years ago. So that is creating a shift for students now, but it may also move us into the areas where we're seeing such opportunity and such demand, and we've been talking about for years.
Bill, one of the things I'd love to hear from you about the decibel level of urgency, in Congress around some of this, but just listening to the way, you're surfing these waves, to come back to my favorite metaphor, it's interesting, the challenge between.
I think they're inside the tube and the tube is collapsing.
The tube is collapsing. Okay, there you go. But the nimbleness that this moment needs, the nimbleness of approach, because Barbara Humpton, the former CEO of Siemens USA, would come in and say, there are so many jobs on the front floor that we don't even know how they're going to be. And so when you kind of look at the workforce, a lot of doors are going to open up. And how do you prepare for that where you don't have a command? Because you told people to go, hey, become coders, but how do we, in terms of aligning workforce, schools, businesses, develop a nimble approach and not a command and control approach?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why Congress is not very, or politicians are not very involved, there's not a lot of good news here, honestly. There just isn't, and everyone wants to be at the ribbon cutting and not at the announcement of the factory closing or having layoffs. I mean, you probably all saw the Amazon 14,000 layoffs with 30,000 in the pipeline, and Amazon is not unique. If you look at the CEO earnings calls, they're all saying, oh, this is great, we plan on really cutting costs, mainly salaries. And so that, the idea of going into middle management as a ticket to the middle class is not assured. It's been going on for a while. There's the flattening of the org chart that's happened for a long time, where you just have, where you used to have accountants, and now you have an accounting software package and stuff like that. So you have now, sort of the CEO and the person who runs the accounting software package, and then you have the line workers and not much in between. And that's a huge change from, 30 years ago. And so that is going to, if anything, accelerate. I mean, this semi-joke about having a single-person unicorn where one person just runs a lot of AI assistants, and you rapidly go into management. Like I still do coding, and what I found is that when you have these AI assistants, the best thing to do is to talk over the plan before you tell them to write code. You say, okay, come up with a plan and let's negotiate the plan with your AI, and then have the AI, when you've agreed on the plan, say write a prompt that provides complete instructions, and then make a whole new chat and feed it that prompt, so that all it knows is this concise set of instructions, and it just hits it out of the park at that point. And so that sort of technique, will be done sort of automatically to eliminate the middle management. And it's sort of my way of eliminating the middle management of code management when I'm looking at projects, and that's going to accelerate.
So do we need to change then the social contract in this country to deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's essential. I first met Sam Altman like 7 years ago because of a shared interest in universal basic income. At the time, he was funding some experiments in UBI. And, the challenge there is not so much, there's enough money to redistribute. People worry about the national debt of like $35 trillion, but guess what? The wealth of Americans is $160 trillion. There's enough money to, cure poverty and homelessness and all this. The challenge is to redistribute that wealth in a way that does not destroy individual incentive. Because if someone's paid for doing nothing, there's a real fear that they'll just sit around and play video games and sit on the couch and take drugs and not do anything productive. And so the question is, how can you redistribute that wealth in a way that does not destroy individual incentive? And I think there's a very important observation. One way you can redistribute about 20% of GDP is with universal guaranteed health care. And traditionally, I have not been on board with that. But because of AI, we're now planning to transition my public posture for that. Because if you look at Canada, all right, they get free health care. They still have the incentive to work. Canadians still work really hard. In fact, most of the breakthroughs, a lot of the breakthroughs in AI actually came out of Canadian universities. And so that the Canadians are a little bit weird, but they're pretty much like us. And so the fact that they still work hard and they still want to compete to have the best apartment with the best view of Montreal or wherever they live. This is so this is a way that we can sort of be guaranteed that we can redistribute 20% of GDP, and that's what this shutdown.
So let me just ask you both quickly, and I'll take a couple of questions from the audience, and then I really appreciate your candor in this. But I think largely in the process of looking at training in the workforce today, which and I can feel your qualms about direct some of this, but the workforce of the day, that nonetheless, as Siemens and others are out there trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to create an adaptable AI workforce, change the AI tools, bring somebody along. Do you think that those programs are worthwhile in terms of directing our young and also intergenerational talent in that direction so that they have a chance in this space, or not?
Yeah, well, you got to give people hope, okay?
Yeah.
But you also have to be honest, and that's the hard part of this. You know, I found it interesting that when I talk to big rooms full of union people, they kind of get it immediately, and they're very receptive. You know, because they've been suffering from automation for decades. And I say, guess what? You are no longer alone on this. That there are, you know, all of the, you know, many of your kids or the kids of your friends who've gone and become computer programmers are now in the same deep shit that you were. When you know, I talked to a retiree. I represent the Stellantis plant that used to be the Chrysler assembly plant. That was a big part of the
Right.
UAW strike settlement. And so that, so I was talking to one of the retirees there about how his life, he was so proud that when a car rolled down the assembly line, he could do a perfect bead weld.
Wow.
And every car, and then one day they installed a welding robot that did the job better than he could. And, you know, the sense of what that does to your self-worth.
You know, when you mentioned the union, I mean, Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, has stepped forward, I think in a risky way, to say we're going to create an AI academy to get teachers to understand how to become AI literate, teach in this space, working with Microsoft, OpenAI, and others. And a lot of folks in our union say, what are you doing? But on the other hand, she's sort of looking at the fact we've got to know and we've got to be, have some versatility in that space.
Yeah, no, I think one of the most interesting, there's some school catering to the children of the rich, where basically the kids spend 2 hours getting AI tutoring, staring at a screen, getting state-of-the-art AI instruction on academic stuff. The rest of their time is spent with social skills.
Right.
And that is not a bad mix, and that may be the future of education.
Scott?
I think one of the things we have to do is kind of resist the urge to create what I call sliver programs, AI sliver programs. I see some community colleges creating AI degrees, but I've never had an employer tell me we need a 2-year AI. But what I do know is that we need to embed AI. We need to thread AI,
horizontal,
as we can say,
not,
horizontal and not verticals. And I think, there has to be, the future is moving faster than we've ever seen because of AI. But if we look to our past, we have seen transitions before. In North Carolina, 70 years ago, when we were created, the majority of people worked in agriculture. They don't now, manufacturing. So we've had transitions. We're just going to have to prepare ourselves for what will be probably the most disruptive transition that we faced.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, yeah, I mean, the danger is that the whole country will look like sort of rural America right now, which is suffering from the drop in manufacturing and in farming due to technology. And so people always ask me, is there any good news in this? Okay.
I was going to get there, but,
Yeah, and so a couple of things. One observation is there's something about our technology that delivers the lion's share of the economic rewards to people acting at the very top levels of the technology stack. And they are often very ignorant of what goes on beneath.
Right.
I pretty much understand everything that goes on inside a cell phone because I've designed integrated circuits, hacked operating systems, written RF protocols, all this sort of stuff. And so I kind of, understand, and that is absolutely no use in my ambition to become a social media influencer. It's really, and it's the same, it's not new, because if you look at all the billionaires were the movie stars, not the people who invented the lenses and the film and all of the high technology. Most of, and there were a few billionaires like, Kodak and Polaroid and stuff like this, but by and large, the people who captured the money were the people at the very top who didn't understand. Mark Zuckerberg, I'm sure he couldn't build a chip if he had to, but doesn't mean he can't, really capture a lot of the revenue with, the companies.
I want to help you become a social media influencer, so I will do that.
My problem is I bring all the charisma of the usual physicist to this job.
No.
So, excuse me, Riz. It's supposed to be Riz, right?
We've got a question right here. Tell us who you are.
President Ralls, one of our network members, and this question is for you. So you briefly mentioned Workforce Pell as a potential opportunity, and I'm curious how you're preparing for it on your campus. Given the timeline, campuses can't really wait for federal guidance, and so what are the conversations you're having on your campus, and what do you need to feel confident to deploy these resources for students?
And I just want to say BHEF is a great group. And
thank you.
Long supported and really appreciate what you do. But Scott?
Well, in conversation, I've put the challenge to our college, let's be the most Workforce Pell prepared college in the country. I think we have a good head start. One, in North Carolina, We have funded non-degree programs at approximately the same level as degree programs for years. We do a lot of short-term accelerated training. At our college, we've been providing about 25 of those programs that lead to certifications, but then walk into degrees free of charge in our community, and those are, I think, the target areas. So we have to pay attention to the walk-ins in terms of skills from non-degree to degree. We're going to have to pay attention to the requirements of Workforce Pell, 70% completion, 70% placement. That's going to mean paying attention to data sets that we haven't before. So we have to be very focused.
Do you work with business credential? Because you were talking a lot about stacked credentials. So more and more business, like I think Siemens may do this, but AT&T, others are creating their own credentialing system and trying to get a currency among those.
Yeah, we really, we try not to create our own credentials because it's the industry credentials that are relevant to the students and being hired. So we have to pay attention to the industry credentials, but then how can we create our programs that allow those to walk in and then move up and earn further credentials while they're in a degree program?
Other questions for the congressman? David Etzwiler. We got a mic here. There's a mic.
I mean, Steve, you've asked the question about what many of us who have been on the podium with you would ask of the federal government. I guess I would ask you, Congressman, what are the things you would ask those of us, particularly in business? I'm thinking a little bit of the Edelman Trust Barometer, that if you look at the sectors that they engaged, said that business is the only one that had 50%, the majority of folks saying you are a competent sector, and a majority of folks saying you are a trusted sector. Other sectors had somewhat one. Not asking you whether you agree with that statement
Congress
or not,
at the bottom. Right.
But what would your challenge be to those of us in business in terms of helping to smooth over these pitfalls and to take advantage of the opportunities that we're talking about today?
Yeah. Well, it's tough. You have a survival imperative. If Amazon did not cut their workforce, they would be suffering in competition from Walmart and everything else. And that is going to be the reality you live in, and it's going to be really, really tough. All right, and so that I think if you had a better safety net when you have to do layoffs, I think that's actually super important right now, because it's going to be. That's another thing, related to the Pell Grants and the federal workforce programs. There's all these counterintuitive results, like when there were big auto industry closings, plant closings, and then we had a workforce re-education program in those areas. Actually, the people that went into the re-education program ended up economically behind those who just got whatever job was available locally. All right, and it's counterintuitive, but that's the way the numbers came out, because what happened is by the time you got out of the workforce re-education program, the jobs weren't really there, and that all of the cafeteria jobs had already been taken by people the first movers who didn't do this. And so the question is, how do we evaluate, and from the federal point of view, what programs are effective? And it's always tough, because we'd love it if you tracked every one of your graduates for the next 20 years and know what fraction of them are using the education you provided.
And we'd love it if we had the resources and the data sets to be able to do that.
So the data sets is owned by the IRS, or now by DOGE. And so that the idea would be that we ought to be able to ask DOGE, with all the data that they've collected, they actually have the ability. And that's the way most countries do this, right? They actually use, as part of their tax data collection, where are you actually working? Okay, and so this, if part of the deal is if you're getting a Pell Grant or any federal assistance, you would opt in, or be requested or required to opt in to having your tax returns visible, to academics studying the effectiveness of programs. Then it'd make our job much easier, because we could know that which programs are working and which are not, in terms of providing educations that are used 5, 10, and 15 years from now, and it would make your life a lot easier in designing your programs.
Well, let me just say, as we close this up, as I'm sort of thinking about what our challenge was today, was to look at where the equilibrium is moving and shifting to, in terms of how we look at workers, how we look at robots, how we look at, the AI-ready workforce that's needed. And what's very clear, Bill, you've written sort of a dystopian vision that you worry about, but there's also a dimension of this now where you have a real shift and a real need. I also look at the geostrategic race as being a consequential one when you're looking at this. But I do think it's great to have, as you said, both hope but also reality in this space and really appreciate this. I will tell you, I think your personality would work really, really well in social media. We took it in 20-second clips. We'll have to work
Okay, all
on that.
right. When they go viral,
yeah.
it will be a first for me.
Okay, well, great. We're going to do this. I'm going to work on it with you because I love our conversations. But please give a big round of applause to Congressman Bill Foster from Illinois, co-chair of the Research Development Caucus, and Scott Ralls, president of Wake Technical Community College. We really appreciate all of you joining us here today. I want to thank Siemens. This has been a great series that we've done on AI for real around the country, not just here in Washington, but really New York, and we were in Dallas, we were in different places around the country. I want to thank David Etzwiler as well, from the president of the Siemens Foundation, and many of you for joining us. But what a great conversation we've had this morning. So thank you all for coming. Bill, thank you, as always. And remember, lighting matters. Great, Bill.